Scarlett Maguire's here. Very good morning, Scarlett.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Somewhere in between, I suppose, we're going to be saying or going to be agreeing. This trade deal is good that it's been done, but, you know, Starmer's slightly over-egging how good it is, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd expect the government to get ahead and try and spin this, especially when they lost control of the narrative on the India trade deal that we had earlier this week. So, no, I think there is a fair deal of spin going on, but I think it is undeniably good news that at least some of the tariffs have been mitigated. Yeah,
I mean, it does look like that, doesn't it? Let's have a quick look, though, at what Kemi Badenoch had to say about it.
This is not a free trade agreement. This was not what we were signing. What's happened is a small tariff deal to fix some of the changes which Donald Trump made last month. We are now in a worse position than we were in March. That's not something to write home about. I think we need to be honest about what we're doing here. If he had come out and said that we're trying to fix a problem that was created last month, I think that we would have understood that. But calling it a historic deal is trying to sell people a pub. Just be honest about what you've done rather than pretend that this is a historic deal that's going to change everyone's lives. We are in a worse position than March. So yes, businesses will welcome this. We're glad to see some improvement, but we're still in a worse position.
I think that's about right, isn't it, Scarlett?
Yeah, I think it's about right. I mean, look, I think you'd always expect the Prime Minister of a country to talk up a deal like this, especially given it was the first one made in the world. And I think you'd always expect the Leader of the Opposition to say, hang on a second, it's actually not as good as it looks.
Yeah.
But no, I think broadly speaking, it is right. I mean, look, it's not the free trade agreement, which we might see in a few months, maybe years, though, maybe potentially never.
Yeah.
But I think it is a start.
I think what's interesting, though, is the sort of caveats that have been put around it. For example, the words to Starmer about not getting too close to the European Union, which is going to slightly sort of hamper him in some way when he tries to get his reset with the EU done. Because what basically Trump seems to have told him is that, you know, we've done this deal with you because we see you as a different entity to the European Union. If you try and do too many kind of, you know, close ties with the European Union, whether it's on, you know, food standards or whether it's on defence or whatever it's on, you know, we may have to have a different conversation. And he's also said anything coming via China we don't want to see. So also kind of warning the UK not to get too cosy with President Xi.
Yeah, absolutely. It does come with some caveats. And I think that European one in particular is going to be difficult for Keir Starmer politically. We know that the bulk of his MPs would rather UK move closer to Europe than America. There's also actually quite a lot of polling that shows that the public would rather the UK have closer sort of trade ties and all the rest of it with Europe again, as opposed to America. And so I think that is difficult for Starmer, especially when we've got a big landmark event coming up next week, which Keir Starmer is going to be using to try and emphasise closer ties, or at least maybe potentially not closer ties, but a better working relationship.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be difficult for Keir Starmer. And on the China one as well, I mean, we saw Reeves go out to China not that long ago, talking about progress with China and working more closely with China over the next few years. Again, that looks like it's going to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, well, this is it. I mean, I said this to John Rentoul a bit earlier on in the show, that, you know, China has been very much at front and centre of this government's plans, hasn't it? I mean, not only has Rachel Reeves been out there, David Lammy's been out there, I think Jonathan Reynolds was out there as well. I think it's the one country where more cabinet ministers have been than any other. And right now we're looking at President Xi in cahoots there with Starmer. But today, President Xi is standing shoulder to shoulder with Vladimir Putin at the Russian Victory military parade, which is going on as we speak.
Yeah, we know Rachel Reeves attracted a fair bit of criticism when she came back with the agreement from China when she went out there a few months ago about what it was going to bring the UK for a few years. But one thing we do know is that, you know, if Labour is moving closer to China, we know the exact opposite is true for the United States. In fact, the Democrats as well over there, but the Republicans in particular, are incredibly hawkish on China and have absolutely no time for closer ties with the country.
No, exactly right. It's quite remarkable, really, how things have changed. Let me show you something that I found particularly creepy, and I don't know about you, whether you've seen it. Peter Mandelson was in the Oval Office when the phone call was made, and he was at his sort of Uriah Heep oleaginous best when he was speaking to the President. Have a look.
Mr. President, thank you very much indeed in hosting us this morning. And thank you very much indeed also for that very typical 11th hour intervention by you with your phone call to the President, demanding even more out of this deal than any of us expected. So thank you for that. The Prime Minister was delighted, obviously, to take that call later tonight. But you took it to another level, and I think the point I would make is twofold. One is that if we're going to rebalance and rebuild international trade in a way that serves all our interests, then we're better doing that together than separately and apart, and that's what we're on a mission to do. But secondly, you've done what you said you would do. You said to the Prime Minister when he came and we visited in the Oval that you would do a good trade deal with the United Kingdom, that you would do it at pace, and that we would be first. And you have delivered that. You've been true to your word. So thank you very much indeed for that. For us, it's not the end. It's it's the end just of the beginning.
Phew. I mean, it's quite hard watching that, isn't it?
I think it definitely looks as if it's more Peter Mandelson's deal than Keir Starmer's there.
It may well be true, because, I mean, I don't know. Rachel Reeves went over to Washington, didn't she, about, 2 weeks ago? And all she got, really, was a shellacking from the IMF. And I don't think she even really got to see very many members of the trade delegation from the White House. So maybe you're right. Maybe it is Mandelson's deal.
Well, and we know he's very close to Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary out there, and has been doing an awful lot of manoeuvring around Trump circles to try and get better relationships. So we know he's a very skilled operator. I mean, I think it's always sort of, I hate the word, but it's like quite cringy watching that level of obsequiousness, although we do know that to some extent Donald Trump demands it really of the people around him. So he's playing the game there, and looks like for Peter Mandelson has actually played it pretty well. Yeah,
I mean, when you see what Mark Carney was like when he went there. I mean, Mark Carney in Canada was all about fire and brimstone, and they're not coming for us. We'll beat them just like we do at hockey every time they play us. And he got to the White House and he was sitting there like a little meek lamb, kind of going, permission to speak, Mr. President, and thank you very much indeed. It's really quite remarkable how coy these prime ministers and world leaders become in the presence of Trump.
No, it absolutely is. It's astonishing. And I think what's quite interesting as well is you talk about Mark Carney. I think what's interesting about Keir Starmer, and one of the reasons I'm sure why Britain was at the front of the queue, which it was for this sort of tariffs agreement, is because Keir Starmer wasn't being as hostile to Trump at home. Even if they're all more mollifying when they're actually in the Oval Office, he was being much less hostile and walking a much sort of closer line to being friendly and supportive of Trump from afar. And I think that looks like it paid off. Yeah,
definitely. Let's talk about Lucy Powell, because she came out with an apology yesterday after the events of last weekend, when she was incredibly rude to Tim Montgomery and also rude to the victims of the rape gangs up in the north of England. Here she is finally apologising in the Parliament yesterday.
Can I actually thank him for raising with me what I said in an episode of Any Questions last week, so I can be absolutely clear with the House today, especially to the victims and survivors of child sexual abuse and grooming gangs, that I am very sorry for those remarks, as I made clear over the weekend. I and every member of this government want your truth to be heard, wherever that truth leads. Your truly appalling experiences need to be acted on, for those responsible to be accountable and face the full force of the law, and for justice to be served.
Well, she said, as she did last weekend, she didn't actually apologise last weekend. She sort of, clarified, as these people now do, these politicians, her position. A lot of people were calling for Keir Starmer to get rid of her. She appears to have survived it, I suppose, but it's another nail in the coffin for the government in terms of its image with ordinary voters, isn't it?
I think it came across incredibly badly, and I think, not least for Lucy Powell. I'm sure it's the first time a lot of people had heard of Lucy Powell. And I think it's very unfortunate, especially at the same time that the government has caught a fair bit of flack for U-turning on the national inquiry. I think to then have those comments made on air, not recorded and then leaked, but on air, on a broadcast programme, I do think doesn't look very good for the government. No, it really doesn't. And as I say, Russia's Victory Day military procession going on today, so presumably we can see it there. There's Vladimir Putin inspecting the troops. We can assume that there are quite a lot of world leaders there, but nobody, I guess, from what you might call the Western Alliance. Ukraine seems to have been put on the back burner for a while. What's going on with that? It certainly does, and it seems that the sort of global attention span has moved on from Ukraine, but
Yeah.
obviously the conflict is very much ongoing. We know that when Donald Trump came to office, he said he was going to end the conflict, immediately and resolve it. That clearly hasn't happened. I think it's very tragic that things are moving on, that we don't have a resolution yet.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting, isn't it? As you say, it's the attention span that sort of goes for a while and it's all you hear about, and then suddenly it's moved on. That's what's going on in this day and age. Scarlett, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Scarlett Maguire, pollster and founder of Merlin Strategy.